It's August 12th, 2016, at the Estádio Olímpico João Havelange in Rio de Janeiro, and something happened on that track that most people still haven't fully processed, not even the people who were there. When Almaz Ayana crossed the finish line of the women's 10,000 meters, she looked around, almost confused, as if she couldn't understand why the nearest runner was so far behind her. That confusion tells you everything about what had just happened. The clock read 29 minutes, 17:45 seconds. A world record. Not by a little, not by a comfortable margin, by 14 seconds. 14. In a sport where records in distance running fall by fractions, by tenths, sometimes by hundredths, she had just rewritten the entire history of the event in a single race. Here's the question I want to sit with, because it's been with me for a while now. It's July 2026. 10 years have nearly passed since that night in Rio. Sifan Hassan has broken world records at the mile, the 5,000 meters, and the 10,000 meters. Faith Kipyegon has shattered marks people thought would stand for decades. Distance running is producing some of the fastest women in history, and yet nobody has come within 15 seconds of 29:17:45. Not one athlete. So is this record untouchable? Or is it something stranger than that? To understand what Ayana did, you first need to understand the record she destroyed. Wang Junxia, China, August 8th, 1993. At the Chinese National Games in Beijing, Wang ran 29:31:78, a time so far ahead of anything any other woman had run that it seemed almost impossible. For years, that's exactly what people suspected it was. Wang trained under Ma Junren, a coach whose athletes broke multiple world records in a single week at those same 1993 National Games. The performances were extraordinary. The explanations were thin. Blood testing technology at the time was nowhere near what it would become, and the suspicion never fully lifted. That 29:31:78 sat on the books for 23 years. 23 years of improved training, better nutrition science, altitude preparation, and nobody touched it. Not even close. The next best legitimate performance heading into Rio 2016 was Tirunesh Dibaba's 29:54:66 from the 2008 Beijing Olympics. That's a gap of over 23 seconds between Wang's mark and the second fastest performance in history. A record so far out in front, it didn't feel like part of the same conversation. What's most surprising about the 2016 Rio 10,000 meters isn't the final time. It's what happened in the first 3 kilometers that told you something was building. The race started conservatively, pacemakers doing their job. But around the 3,000-meter mark, something shifted. Ayana began moving through the field with a purpose that looked less like racing and more like a training run she'd planned in advance. The pacemakers, brought in to push aggressive early splits, simply could not hold the pace she was demanding. By 5 kilometers, she had already begun to separate herself, running 14:46 through the midpoint. Put yourself in the shoes of any of those other athletes for a second. You're an Olympic finalist, one of the best distance runners on earth, and the woman in front of you isn't just pulling away, she's accelerating. Here's what doesn't make sense on the surface. The conditions in Rio were not ideal for a world record. The Engenhaus Stadium sits at roughly sea level. No altitude advantage, unlike Mexico City or Font Romeu, where so many distance records have been set. The temperature that evening was warm and humid, the kind of night that typically slows times down, and yet Ayana kept moving. The second half of her race was faster than the first. She covered the final 5 kilometers in approximately 14:31. Going back through the lap splits, one detail kept standing out. There was no visible moment of strain, no survival shuffle in the final 2 laps. She ran the last 400 meters in around 64 seconds, which for a woman who had just run 9,600 meters at world record pace is essentially incomprehensible. The field she left behind was not a weak one. Vivian Cheruiyot finished second in 29:32:53, which would have beaten Wang Junxia's 1993 world record by an entire second. Tirunesh Dibaba, a 3-time Olympic champion and one of the greatest distance runners in history, finished third in 29:42:56. These were not ordinary runners having ordinary races. Ayana was simply operating somewhere else entirely. This is where I have to raise the question that has hung over this record since the night it was set. Most people assume the suspicion has faded with time, but the lack of counter-evidence tells a different story. Ayana tested negative for prohibited substances at Rio. She has never served a doping ban. But the margin, 14 seconds, the largest improvement in the women's 10,000 meters since electronic timing was introduced, inevitably invites scrutiny. Here's the take that will probably get some pushback. I think the sport failed itself that night, not by ignoring the performance, but by failing to build the infrastructure that would allow the performance to be fully trusted. The biological passport system existed, but the testing culture around the Ethiopian program in particular had too many gaps for too many years. That's not an accusation against Ayana. It's an observation about a system. And what it means is that one of the most astonishing performances in athletics history exists permanently inside a question mark. Not because of what we know, but because of what we can't fully verify. What do you think? Did the sport's testing infrastructure fail the athletes who ran clean that night? Or is doubt just the price of a performance this far outside the norm? I genuinely want to know where you land on that. One detail that stuck with me while researching this. In the immediate aftermath of the race, Ayana was visibly emotional. She knelt on the track, pointed to the sky, waved to the crowd. But in the interviews that followed, she spoke about the performance with an almost matter-of-fact certainty, as if she had known what she was capable of and simply gone out and done it. "I trained very hard," she said. "I was ready." No apparent shock at the margin. Whether you read that as the composure of an elite competitor or as something else is a question only you can answer. Now the decade since. Because the silence around 29:17, 45 in the years that followed, is its own kind of story. Sifan Hassan ran 29:36, 67 at the Tokyo Olympics in 2021, winning gold. An extraordinary run. Still 19 seconds away. In 2023, Letesenbet Gidey, one of the most prolific record breakers of her generation, ran 29:38, 55 at the Paris Diamond League, still 21 seconds behind. In 2025, as the sport continued its upward trajectory, the closest anyone came to the Rio mark was still hovering around 29:35 to 29:40. Nobody has cracked 29:30. Nobody has come within 13 seconds of the record. Wang Junxia's old mark of 29:31, 78, the one Ayana ran through, would today rank as the second fastest performance in history. Let that sit for a moment. Looking back at what the sport has produced since Rio, the real question isn't whether the record was legitimate. It's what kind of record it actually is. Some world records fall because the sport gets deeper and faster over time. Others represent a singular intersection of one athlete at her absolute peak in a race that aligned perfectly in a way it never quite aligned again. Ayana won the 10,000 meters at the 2017 World Championships in London. She ran well, but she never came close to 29:17 again. Injury, illness, and the grinding reality of competing at the highest level year after year took their toll. By 2019, she was struggling to make finals. The version of Almaz Ayana that ran in Rio, that specific, unrepeatable version, appears to have existed for one night only. This record belongs to a particular category of athletic achievement, the performance that defines a career, defines an event, and refuses to be explained by anything that comes after it. Wang Junxia's 29:31, 78 stood for 23 years under a cloud of suspicion. Ayana ran through it and kept going. Whether the full story of that August night in Rio ever becomes completely clear, the mark is real, it is ratified, and it is standing. Nobody touches it, and in a sport that keeps producing extraordinary performances. Kipyegon's sub-3:49 mile, Hassan's range across distances. The fact that 29:17:45 remains so far in the distance is what makes it one of the greatest single performances in the history of track and field. Will anyone break 29:17 in our lifetime? Comment YES or no. I read every single one. If you want more stories like this, the records that don't make sense, the performances that refuse to be explained away, subscribe to Record Chase. New video every week. And if you've been here a while, hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next.